Hi everyone. Today's book is Elevator Jones Meets the Wright Brothers. This is the second book in the Elevator Jones series. Elevator Jones Volume 2. Chapter 1. Henry Jones was doodling on his vocabulary sheet when his third-grade teacher caught him by surprise. "Clear your desk," said Mrs. Vargas. "It's time for your social studies test." "Test? Uh-oh," said Henry under his breath. He'd forgotten all about the test on the Wright brothers. Henry and his friend Tommy Huggins had been so busy planning their next great adventure that they'd forgotten to study. Henry turned to look at Tommy as Mrs. Vargas placed the test on his desk. "Oops," mouthed Tommy. "Turn around, Henry," said Mrs. Vargas. "Eyes on your paper." Henry didn't even bother looking at the test. It was hopeless. He just put his head in his hands and groaned. A few minutes later, Mrs. Vargas said, "Pencils down. Your time is up." "Thank goodness," said Henry. "Put your test on my desk on your way out of the classroom. I'll have those graded and back to you in the morning," said Mrs. Vargas. "Just wonderful," said Tommy to Henry, sarcastically. "Yeah, tell me about it," said Henry. "We really screwed up." "It couldn't have been that bad," said Tommy. "At least you knew the Wright brothers' names." "Yep, that much I got right. Gary and Ordley," replied Henry. I think you mean Wilbur and Orville," added Tommy, fighting back laughter. "Oh, no," replied Henry. He put his hands over his face. Chapter 2. After school, the boys went back to Henry's suite at the Grand Excelsior Hotel. Henry was still worried about flunking the Wright brothers' test. "What's the big deal?" asked Tommy. "It's just one test." "It was really just a quiz." "I've never had anything less than an A on any test or quiz, ever," replied Henry. "Well, I guess there's a first time for everything," added Tommy. "You don't understand," said Henry. "My dad loves the Wright brothers. When he heard that we were learning about them in school, he told me that he'd throw a pizza party if I got an A on the test." "Are you telling me you just cost us a pizza party?" asked Tommy. "Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying," replied Henry. "Well, we need to fix this," said Tommy. "Yeah, but how?" asked Henry. "We could go see Horatio," said Tommy. I don't know. I almost got in big trouble the last time," said Henry. "Do you want that pizza party or not?" replied Tommy. "Of course," answered Henry. "Then this is a job for Elevator Jones," announced Tommy. "Seems like a bad idea, Tommy," responded Henry. "Look, I'm ready for my first adventure. Plus, it's low risk. We only need to go back to last night so we can study, and then get a do-over on the test. You get your A, and we all get pizza," explained Tommy. "Well, what are we waiting for?" asked Henry. Chapter 3. The door to Henry's suite flew open into the hallway as the boys burst from the room. They raced down the hall in search of Horatio. They stopped at the elevator and quickly tapped the buttons as they tried to catch their breath. When the door to the old elevator opened, they yelled, "Horatio! Horatio! Horatio!" A surprised man in his late 20s said, "My name is Carl." "What? Who are you?" yelled Henry. I'm Carl," replied Carl. "Yeah, he just said his name was Carl," said Tommy. "Well, Carl, where is Horatio?" asked Henry. "We need to see him, like yesterday," added Tommy. "I think he's having dinner in the lounge," replied Carl. "Dinner? It's 3:15 in the afternoon," said Henry. "Well, he's old. What do you want me to tell you?" answered Carl. "He's got a point," added Tommy. "Never mind," replied Henry. "Can you take us to the lounge?" "Sure," said Carl. "Hop in." The boys entered the elevator as Carl started to work the hand crank on the antique machine. After a few seconds, the elevator started its journey down to the second floor. The lounge is located on that floor, but Henry tries to avoid it at all costs. Every time he goes down there, he gets his cheeks pinched by Thelma, the head chef. Old Thelma had been pinching Henry's cheeks since before he could remember. He did remember that he always hated it. The doors to the elevator opened to reveal the lounge of the Grand Excelsior. The room was kind of dark, and it was filled with big chairs, long tables, and windows that stretched from the floor to the ceiling. "Thanks a bunch, Clark," said Henry, exiting the elevator. "It's Carl," said Carl. "This place smells like broccoli and feet," added Tommy. "It's odd. What do you want me to tell you?" "It's old. What do you want me to tell you?" replied Henry. "Hey, isn't that Horatio?" said Tommy, pointing to the corner of the lounge. "Sure is," replied Henry. "Let's go," answered Tommy. "No," replied Henry nervously. "There's Thelma. Don't move." "Who?" asked Tommy. "Thelma. She's the head chef here. She's been squeezing and pinching my cheeks for as long as I can remember, answered Henry. Henry ducked behind a large plant to hide from Thelma. Fine, I'll distract her. You go get Horatio, replied Tommy. Deal, said Henry. Thanks for taking one for the team. Tommy walked straight towards Thelma. Excuse me, ma'am. Do you know where I could get some warm milk and cookies? My tummy hurts, said Tommy, as he rubbed his stomach. Oh my, aren't you just precious, said Thelma as she pinched his cheeks. You remind me of my sweet, sweet Henry. Never heard of him, replied Tommy, swatting Thelma's hand away. But boy, oh boy, does my tummy hurt. Of course, darling, said Thelma. Follow me. As Thelma led Tommy into the kitchen in search of milk and cookies, Henry rushed through the maze of oversized chairs to find Horatio. Chapter 4. Horatio, Horatio, yelled Henry as he approached Horatio's table. What's the trouble, Henry? Asked Horatio as he lifted a spoonful of soup from his bowl. We need help with the elevator, replied Henry. Carl's filling in for me. I'm having soup. It's beef barley night, said Horatio as he took another spoonful of soup. I understand that it's beef barley night, but Carl can't help us with this one, replied Henry. Don't tell me, answered Horatio. Yep. This is a job for Elevator Jones, replied Henry. Nope, not doing it, Henry. No time travel on beef barley night. I wait all week for this day, said Horatio. We need to go back to study the Wright Brothers, said Henry. There's a pizza party riding on it. Pizza party? Why didn't you say so? This sounds important. The soup can wait, replied Horatio as he stood up from the table. Quickly, to the elevator. Horatio raced towards the elevator with Henry behind him. Tommy, yelled Henry. Tommy, let's go. Tommy dropped his cookie and started to run from the kitchen. He turned and said to Thelma, I'll be back. Don't let anyone have those. Not even Henry. Chapter 5. Horatio and the boys approached the elevator. Horatio hit the button, and the old doors creaked as they slid open. Carl was happy to see them. Hey, guys, said Carl excitedly. Where are you headed? Out of the way, Carl, replied Horatio. Go have some soup. But, stammered Carl. Seriously, Carl, have some soup, answered Henry. We'll be back in no time. No cookies for you, though, added Tommy, as he moved past Carl onto the elevator. Carl frowned as the elevator doors closed. Hold on, fellows, announced Horatio. I'm sending you back. He turned the crank on the elevator. The old elevator bonked and clanked and started to shake. Henry and Tommy held onto the railing before they were thrown to the floor. When they stood up, they were whipped in the face with wind and sand. The sound of crashing waves and seagulls could be heard in the distance. Where are we? Asked Tommy, spitting sand from his mouth. Not sure, but I have a bad feeling, answered Henry. Do you think, started Tommy, that Horatio sent us to Kitty Hawk to meet the Wright Brothers? Added Henry. Yeah, I do. Well, it's not what we wanted, but who better to learn about the Wright Brothers than the actual Wright Brothers? We'll ace the test, replied Tommy. Let's go find Gary and Ordley, said Henry. You mean Wilbur and Orville, responded Tommy. Yeah, them too, replied Henry. They both laughed. Let's explore the town, suggested Tommy. If we're really in Kitty Hawk, the Wright Brothers' workshop can't be far from here. The boys wandered out of the sand dunes and began walking up a narrow street. Our quick trip to the workshop will be fun and get us some information so we can get an A on the test, said Henry. And a pizza party, added Tommy. After a few minutes of walking, the boys came upon a barn with lots of parts and machinery laying around. Maybe this is the place, suggested Tommy. There's one way to find out, replied Henry. The boys slowly approached the wooden door. Henry knocked and waited. Chapter 6. The door slowly opened. Hello, said a man. Can I help you? Are you one of the famous Wright brothers? Asked Henry. Well, we're not famous yet. I'm Orville. My brother Wilbur is over there with the wrench, replied Orville. Wilbur gave a wave and returned to his work. Cool. I'm Henry. This is my friend Tommy. We'd like to learn about the work you do here, responded Henry. Sure. Come on in, and I'll show you around our workshop, responded Orville. He led the boys into the workshop. There were tools and parts spread all over the floors and tabletops. They approached a unique-looking structure. This is what we're working on right now, explained Orville. We call it the airplane. We've crashed a few, but Wilbur thinks he has the right formula. That's right, replied Wilbur. We didn't have enough control on the back of the plane, so I added a movable rudder. That should make this baby take flight. Remember that. Movable rudder, whispered Henry to Tommy. Well, let's try it out, said Orville. Let's fly. Chapter 7. The boys stood on the windswept dunes of Kitty Hawk, about to witness history. Orville stood alongside the boys as Wilbur climbed into the cockpit. "It's going to work this time, I just know it," said Orville. "Woohoo! Let's go, Wilbur!" chanted Henry and Tommy. Wilbur started up the engine. It sounded a lot like the elevator at the Grand Excelsior. The plane started to slowly move forward before it took off and was above the ground. Orville and the boys gave chase, following Wilbur and the airplane down the beach. Wilbur's rough landing did some minor damage to the airplane. Wilbur was all right, and Tommy retrieved the movable rudder. He held onto it for safekeeping. Wilbur's flight lasted 59 seconds, the longest engine-powered flight in history. Orville measured the distance of Wilbur's flight at 852 feet. The brothers hugged and danced with joy. Chapter 8. Suddenly, the boys were back on the floor of the old elevator at the Grand Excelsior. They helped each other up as Horatio asked, "Well, are we good? Did you learn everything you needed to know about the Wright brothers?" "Yeah, more than we ever imagined," replied Henry. "You sent us all the way back to 1903, added Tommy, as he dumped sand from his shoe. "Well, I figured the best way to learn about them was to meet them," explained Horatio. "We saw the first flight," replied Henry. "It was awesome." "What's that?" asked Horatio, pointing to Tommy's hand. "That's a movable rudder," explained Tommy. "Why do you still have that?" asked Henry. "I grabbed it for safekeeping. It broke off the plane when Wilbur landed," replied Tommy. "Well, you better hold on to it. There's no telling what kind of damage we've done," said Henry. "What do you mean?" asked Tommy. "The movable rudder was the key addition that Wilbur added to the plane to make it fly. Now Wilbur's rudder is in 2017 instead of 1903. That could be a big problem," explained Henry. "Well, the airport is right across the street. I'm sure the planes are still flying," said Tommy. "You're sure?" "I'll bet you one of my famous banana spray cheese and pretzel sandwiches," replied Henry. "You're on," answered Tommy. The boys raced out of the elevator into the lobby of the Grand Excelsior. Henry and Tommy went through the front door and looked across the street towards the entrance to the International Airport. There was no airport, runways, or planes across the street. The boys only saw a bowling alley and an old bus station. "I told you!" exclaimed Henry. "Where's the airport and the airplanes?" asked Tommy, scratching his head. "They haven't been invented yet," explained Henry. "We have the movable rudder. The Wright brothers are still back in 1903 trying to figure out the missing piece of their airplane. The missing piece is in your hand." What do we do now?" asked Tommy. "We're supposed to go to Aqualand next month, and I don't want to take the bus all the way to Florida." "We need to go back," said Henry. "Horatio is not going to be happy." The boys raced back to the elevator. Horatio was waiting by the door. "Well, what's the verdict?" asked Horatio. "We need to go back," replied Henry. "Oh, no. Too dangerous," answered Horatio. "Look, do you want to take the bus all the way to Florida?" asked Tommy. "What?" replied Horatio. "Just turn the crank, old timer. There's a pizza party and the future of flight riding on this mission," answered Henry. "Hold on tight," replied Horatio, as he began turning the crank on the old elevator. Chapter 9. The boys were soon back on the dunes of Kitty Hawk. They followed the road through town back to the Wright brothers' workshop. As Henry and Tommy approached the workshop, they heard loud voices and clanging metal. "It's never going to work," shouted Wilbur. "We'll never get this machine off the ground." "We need to keep trying," responded Orville. "I know we're close. I can feel it." Henry turned to Tommy. "I'll knock on the door to get their attention. You sneak in the back and put the movable rudder on the workbench. I'll meet you back here in 5 minutes." "Good plan. Wish me luck," replied Tommy. Henry approached the door of the workshop as Tommy snuck behind the building. Henry knocked and waited. The door was jerked open, and an irritated Orville stared at Henry. "Who are you?" asked Orville. Replied Henry. "What do you want? Are you a spy?" asked Orville. "A spy? No," responded Henry. "I live next door." "In that old barn?" asked Orville. "I didn't think anyone lived there." "Who is it?" called Wilbur. "Just the neighbor kid," replied Orville. "We don't have any neighbors," replied Wilbur. Wilbur walked towards the door. Tommy climbed through the window while Henry distracted the Wright brothers. Tommy placed the movable rudder on the workbench next to the airplane. "This kid is probably a spy," added Wilbur. "No, I was just wondering if I could borrow some sugar," responded Henry. "Sugar? This is a workshop, not a bakery," answered Orville. "Yeah, we've got serious work to do here, kid," added Wilbur. Henry spotted Tommy giving a thumbs up from behind the workbench. "Okay, thanks anyway. See you guys around," replied Henry. The boys raced back to the dunes. Suddenly they heard a loud thud and were thrown to the ground. When they stood up, the boys were back in the elevator at the Grand Excelsior. "How did it go?" asked Horatio. "So far, so good," replied Tommy. "We just need to make sure the air part is back in business," added Henry. The boys raced off the elevator, through the lobby, and out the front door. There in front of them was the entrance to the International Airport. Planes soared overhead. We did it, said Tommy. Now I don't have to take the bus to Florida. Now no one has to take the bus to Florida, added Henry. Good point, replied Tommy. The bad news is, we still didn't study for the quiz, or go back to take it over again. There's no chance Horatio will let us go back 3 times in one day, said Henry. I've got an idea, responded Tommy. Chapter 10. Henry and Tommy entered the classroom and placed a paper on the desk of Mrs. Vargas. The paper was titled, The Importance of the Movable Rudder, by Henry Jones and Tommy Huggins. What's this? Asked Mrs. Vargas. We weren't happy with our test, answered Henry. We decided to do a little extra credit, added Tommy. This is wonderful, replied Mrs. Vargas as she read the paper. Where did you boys get all this information? The details are terrific. We spent all night doing research, explained Tommy. Yep, it's almost like we were there for the first flight, added Henry. Well, you boys didn't do very well on your test, but this paper looks like an A+, said Mrs. Vargas. Pizza party, chanted the boys. What? Replied Mrs. Vargas. Don't worry, everyone is invited. Even you, Mrs. Vargas, answered Henry. Thanks for listening to Elevator Jones Meets the Wright Brothers. Stay tuned into Read With Me TV for other books coming in the next few weeks and days. We're working on some new stories. If you'd like to submit a story to us, you can email us at readwithmetv@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Read With Me TV. Thank you very much.